The moment the crystal wineglass shattered across the marble floor, every conversation inside the luxurious Manhattan restaurant died. Forks froze in midair, musicians stopped playing, and even the executive chef peeked through the kitchen doors. At the center of the silence stood a young woman dressed in an elegant black designer suit, her icy blue eyes filled with the kind of authority that made CEOs tremble. Everyone knew her as Victoria Sterling, the feared daughter of America's most ruthless billionaire. She had built a reputation for destroying careers with a single phone call and humiliating anyone who dared question her. But on that unforgettable evening, the only person who refused to bow before her was an ordinary waitress whose quiet voice carried a secret powerful enough to shake the Sterling Empire to its foundation. If you believe kindness is stronger than power and that everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, share this story with someone you care about, and subscribe for more emotional stories that restore faith in humanity. Victoria Sterling had spent her entire life surrounded by wealth that most people could never imagine. Her father, Charles Sterling, owned one of the largest real estate empires in the United States, with luxury hotels, office towers, and shopping centers stretching from New York to California. Since childhood, Victoria had been taught that emotions were weaknesses and that respect could only be earned through fear. Every employee lowered their eyes when she entered a room, every assistant rushed to fulfill her demands, and every executive rehearsed their presentations dozens of times before standing in front of her. To the outside world, she appeared untouchable, confident, and perfectly in control. Yet beneath the expensive clothes and flawless makeup lived a lonely woman who had forgotten what genuine kindness looked like. That evening, Victoria entered Sterling Grand Hotel's exclusive rooftop restaurant for an inspection dinner. Managers whispered nervously as they followed her from table to table. Every detail had to be perfect because one mistake often meant immediate dismissal. Guests noticed the tension and quietly moved aside whenever she walked past. Among the restaurant staff was a 26-year-old waitress named Grace Carter, a hardworking woman from Ohio who had moved to New York after losing both of her parents in a tragic highway accident. Grace worked double shifts to pay her younger brother Nathan's college tuition while quietly dreaming of opening a small bakery one day. Despite carrying the weight of countless responsibilities, she greeted every customer with warmth that no amount of exhaustion could erase. As Victoria examined the dining room, she noticed a tiny water stain on one of the polished silver trays Grace was carrying. Without hesitation, she stopped in front of the waitress and criticized her loudly enough for every customer to hear. The room became painfully quiet as Grace lowered her eyes, embarrassed but calm. Instead of arguing, she apologized and reached to replace the tray. But before she could step away, something caught her attention. Hanging from Victoria's neck beneath her expensive blouse was a small silver necklace. Attached to it was an old pendant engraved with two delicate words. Anna James. Grace's heart nearly stopped. She had seen those exact words before. Years earlier, while helping her mother organize donated belongings for a church charity in Columbus, Grace had found an old photograph inside a worn leather Bible. The photograph showed a smiling little girl wearing the same pendant while standing beside a young woman whose name was written on the back. Anna James. Grace remembered asking her mother who the family was. Her mother had quietly explained that Anna had once worked as a housekeeper for a wealthy businessman before mysteriously disappearing with her little daughter nearly 3 decades earlier. No one ever discovered what happened. Looking again at Victoria's pendant, Grace felt a strange certainty she couldn't explain. Later that night, after the restaurant closed, Grace gathered enough courage to approach Victoria privately. She simply asked why someone known as Victoria Sterling would wear a necklace engraved with the name Anna James. For the first time in years, Victoria's confident expression cracked. Her face turned pale as if someone had opened a door she had spent her entire life trying to keep locked. Victoria admitted she had never known the meaning behind the necklace. Charles Sterling had always told her it belonged to her late mother and ordered her never to remove it. Every time she asked questions, he changed the subject or became angry. Eventually, she stopped asking. Grace couldn't sleep that night. Something about the story refused to leave her mind. The following weekend she traveled back to Ohio and visited the small church where her late mother had volunteered. After hours of searching dusty storage boxes, she found the old photograph again. On the back was another sentence she had never noticed before. Anna James and daughter Victoria. Summer of 1995. Grace stared at the picture in disbelief. The child in the photograph looked exactly like the young billionaire's daughter. When Grace returned to New York, she requested another meeting with Victoria. This time she brought the photograph. Victoria's hands shook uncontrollably as she compared the picture to the pendant around her neck. For the first time since childhood, memories she had buried deep inside began surfacing. She remembered a tiny white farmhouse, the smell of fresh bread, a woman singing lullabies, and someone calling her by a completely different surname. Not Sterling. James. The discovery shattered everything Victoria believed about herself. Unable to ignore the evidence, she secretly hired a private investigator. Weeks later, the report arrived. The truth was even darker than anyone imagined. Nearly 30 years earlier, Charles Sterling had fallen in love with Anna James, a kind young housekeeper who refused to marry him after discovering his dishonest business practices. Shortly afterward, Anna died in what had been ruled an accident. Charles then legally adopted little Victoria, erased every record of her mother's identity, changed her surname to Sterling, and raised her as his heir. Everyone believed he had rescued an orphan. In reality, he had stolen a child from her own family history. Victoria spent several sleepless nights reading every page of the investigation. Every expensive possession suddenly felt meaningless. The empire she had protected all her life had been built upon lies. For the first time, she looked at Grace not as an employee but as the person brave enough to tell her the truth when everyone else remained silent. Victoria began changing in ways that shocked everyone around her. She canceled policies that punished employees for minor mistakes. She increased wages for hotel workers across the country. She created scholarships for children who had lost their parents, inspired by Grace's story. She personally apologized to dozens of former employees she had treated unfairly. News outlets couldn't explain the sudden transformation of America's coldest billionaire heiress. But Grace knew. Healing had replaced fear. Months later, Victoria visited the quiet cemetery in Ohio where Anna James had finally been identified through old family records. Standing beside the simple gravestone, she placed fresh white roses beneath her mother's name. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered the name she had been denied for nearly her entire life. For the first time, she no longer felt like Victoria Sterling. She felt like Victoria James. Grace stood several feet away, giving her the privacy she deserved. Neither woman spoke for several minutes because some moments become too sacred for words. The wind gently moved through the trees as if carrying away years of pain, anger, and unanswered questions. Victoria eventually established the Anna James Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers, orphan children, and struggling workers across the United States. Every hotel owned by the Sterling Company adopted new programs focused on compassion instead of fear. Employee satisfaction reached record highs, and surprisingly, company profits increased as kindness replaced intimidation. Grace never accepted a large reward for uncovering the truth. Instead, Victoria quietly invested in Grace's lifelong dream. One spring morning, Grace opened Carter's Corner Bakery in Brooklyn. The bakery quickly became famous not only for its fresh bread but also for the sign hanging near the entrance. Kindness changes lives more than money ever will. Customers often smiled without realizing those simple words had changed 2 lives forever. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that truth, kindness, and courage can change even the hardest hearts. Before this story ends, tell us in the comments, if you had discovered a life-changing secret like Grace did, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Victoria spent years believing that power came from making people afraid. Grace proved that real strength comes from telling the truth with compassion. One ordinary waitress did what wealth, influence, and authority never could. She gave a lost daughter back her real name. And in finding that hidden name, Victoria finally discovered the person she was always meant to become.